Welcome back to the Four Gardens podcast. I'm Jake Ifshin. The Four Gardens is an approach to cultivate a life of balance, joy, and abundance by focusing on four key areas. On this show, I talk to people inspiring me in those areas of health, nature, creativity, and service. To learn more, go to fourgardenspodcast.com and follow at Four Gardens Podcast on Instagram. Make sure to like and subscribe to hear new episodes and support this project. If you're listening to the podcast, take a minute to check out our YouTube channel, which features short video clips from the podcast, as well as engaging original content, such as the first Four Gardens vlog. My guest today is Luke Monteleone, a life purpose coach and the founder of Purpose State. He's an experienced founder and digital strategist with 10 plus years of experience building brands in the fashion, wellness, and entertainment industries. Luke possesses a deep passion for storytelling through digital content and cultivating communities around purpose with proven results. I've been working with Luke over the past 4 months as a business coach on the Four Gardens podcast, and he's helped me grow this project through his wealth of experience and his compassionate guidance. I'm looking forward to my conversation with Luke. Let's jump right in. Luke, thanks so much for coming on the podcast today.
My pleasure, Jake. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I've been excited for this conversation as you've been someone who's really supported my work and finding my voice with this podcast. And not only that, but helping me get the word out and the message out around self-cultivation and the Four Gardens. So thank you for that.
Absolutely, brother. It's been an honor to support you. And I'm just so excited at what's really unfolded with Four Gardens, the podcast, and the whole community that's being built here.
Yeah, I've really felt you rooting for me all along the way and celebrating each milestone we've had since we started this collaboration.
Amen. So happy to hear that.
Yeah, it's been a good journey so far, and looking forward to continuing and noticing that you've supported me on my purpose right now. So Four Gardens and supporting people to find life balance, to cultivate their thriving self has become my mission. And so I see the business coaching work as connected to the life purpose coaching you do. I'd love to give you a chance to explain a little bit of what it is. What is life purpose coaching and life purpose?
Great question. Well, I have my specific bias and lens that I see it through. But for me, purpose, which we'll start with, is really, I believe, this inevitable journey that we all are on as part of this human experience. Obviously, we could talk about the totality of our soul, but we're here having this human experience. And I believe it's really the reason that we're here. And so much of that, I think we've been sort of maybe indoctrinated or led to believe in Western culture is sort of associated with maybe the contribution that we have, or rather what we do, with our lives, specifically from the masculine end of things, what we do with our careers. We look at the Steve Jobs and the Elon Musks of the world in present day and think, wow, maybe those guys are really living out their purpose because they're doing something that's really grand. And I'm taking it, a little bit further back towards the core of what's the reason that each of us came to live here. And of course, perhaps none of us can truly know this for certain. And a number of spiritual philosophies have alluded to this in various forms. But for me, I look at purpose as really this road back to wholeness. And I guess the question is, well, why? And when I look at what's sort of disconnected us from this maybe innate state that I believe we possess, that's, fully connected to our soul, that's connected to essentially this concept of oneness. I look at the culprit, perhaps lack of better words, being trauma. The thing that disconnects us early in life, usually beyond anything that we can control. We're born often into circumstance, depending on what you subscribe to. I guess the question is, did we choose to come into the families of origins, or the family of origin, or really the circumstances that we were born into, that we were raised within the environment, the container? And so each of us, I believe, sort of experiences this inevitable amount of trauma in whatever capacity. Obviously, some of us more so than others within the mental health space. There's definitely a key difference between capital T trauma and the more nuanced traumas, which I believe again is really just disconnecting us from our bodies, from our essence, from our spirit, from our minds, from one another, and really knowing who we are. And so when I think of purpose, it's very much a healing process. It's very much a journey of self-discovery, yes, but even more so of being able to begin to shed the layers of the not self. And that process takes us into quite a bit of historical context of how did we become disconnected, right? Back to the trauma. How did we essentially kind of get off track from this really authentic expression that I would argue we knew when we were young who we were? And conditioning, circumstance, trauma itself tends to be the things that knock us off that path. So I believe it's an inherent part of being a human being. It's also a cause for a lot of suffering. But if we can maybe reframe it a bit, we begin to see, I think, that it's inextricably linked to our purpose in life.
I'm finding this really interesting, this reframing of purpose as I'm hearing it as almost the end state, the goal we're getting to. We want to get back to purpose. And what you're saying, in a way, I'm desiring to be connected to my purpose. And
Mhm.
hearing that, the first thing you said was about how we're conditioned. There's this conditioning around career and work. Identity and career are so linked in our society. In my experience and your experience, we've talked about that in our friendship and how that's been part of both of our journeys and part of both of our works. And so I hear that's something that that is coming from not self. You described it that way, coming from
Absolutely.
outside, right? But then I like how you talk when you zoom back. It is trauma that is the beginning of this that shapes us, I guess, in a way. That these traumas that shape us, um, maybe would you say shape how we relate to that conditioning that society is putting on us too? Is going to be, I mean, trauma. Say some more about defining trauma. I guess I think this is a great way into your work.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I would say, they're definitely sort of interwoven into one another, and conditioning itself can be traumatic. If it's taking us away from our authenticity, if it's taking us
Yes.
away from, who we truly feel that we are. I know I work with a number of clients that have been, including myself, that have just been conditioned based around expectation, based around, being shoved down, their throats a specific religious indoctrination, right? Or this is what we do in our culture. And believe it or not, but we're not all born to be cookie cutter or imprints, of our parents or our childhood caretakers. And so, yes, I mean, trauma itself, I think it's so nuanced, and historically we've kind of reserved the term for more of the capital T's,
Right.
acts of violence, obviously, full disclaimer here on trigger warning, rape, sexual abuse, various forms of physical abuse, emotional abuse, all the abuses. And the reality is it can be very, very nuanced when it comes to taking us off track. So I think trauma is really the focus.
Say a little more too about how these nuanced traumas, maybe even an example from your life, how one of these more subtle traumas or nuanced, I like that word, has showed up for you recently and how you've worked with it to get back to purpose.
Mm. Well, the biggest one I've been working with lately, and I don't know if it would be classified as necessarily a small trauma, but it actually involved my birth. And my birth, which was very much unbeknownst to me having any significance in my life, my first experience upon landing on this rock, was being pulled out of the womb, out of my mother with a forceps. And because I was born prematurely and to a mother who had type 1 diabetes at the time, they wanted to run tests. And, I think I was jaundiced and they wanted, to pump me full of antibiotics. And so I was underneath the incubator, in the incubator for about 10 days. And unbeknownst to me, up until recently, that was a very traumatic event. And I'm realizing how, by way of my internal system, specifically like how my nervous system really started to shape around this trauma, right? And how my attachment system really started to come online and sort of start to take on adaptive qualities as a means of survival. And so when I'm looking at, this strong pattern of avoidance in my present day, or really something that I've been working through as of late. So I'd like to say I'm moving away from avoidance, which I think maybe we'll get into in a little bit in regards to the attachment styles.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I look at sort of my baseline with my nervous system that typically was kind of in a survival state, in the fight or flight state, the sympathetic activation, which resulted in things like a lot of rage and anger as a young child, dealing with this dysregulation in my body. I start to understand why I was the way that I was, or why I am the way that I am. And so something that has created sort of a low grade suffering, and a constant one at that, which of course has this real compounding effect on my life as it's shown up in each respective area at different times throughout my life here on earth. It's created a lot of pain. And so without me knowing that, which of course very few of us, if any of us, we're not supposed to have really any explicit memory of our birth itself. This kind of thing was very much existing far beyond my cognitive faculties, my explicit memory. And so it was just creating, a low grade suffering for me. And so what I've had to do in terms of how it relates to purpose, to answer your question, is really begin to sort of, yes, there's been a healing process involved with that. And a lot of that is learning what are the nuances that specifically within a relational context, especially within the context of my relationship to the feminine, right? My mother in this case. What is the type of nurturance, the type of ways that I need to be met that are going to create this corrective experience for me, my body, my soul, to be able to come back into more of this regulated sort of state of peace, the desired states that kind of exist across the spectrum of, self-help and a number of spiritual disciplines. So yeah, does that kind of answer your question?
It does. Yeah. And just to follow up, what are some of the tools you've used or strategies to work with that particular trauma and your relationships to the feminine?
Well, I love to get very experiential with it. I've actually had some wonderful sort of mentors and guides along the way that are very well attuned. They're very, I guess, well versed in attachment theory and a number of other somatic experiencing and embodiment practices. And so, things like attuned touch from the feminine, being just supported, being in relationship with a secure attachment from that is of the feminine, a woman in this case, has been incredibly healing as I've navigated some of the ongoing insecurities that I've faced, specifically around, my professional pursuits and really going out into what historically has felt like risky territory. I've had that secure base in these sort of strategic spiritual mentors and partners where they've been able to not only attune to my needs, but they've really begun to show me what's possible in terms of asking for what I need. And that's made really all the difference for me. because I'm getting what I truly need to evolve in that capacity.
I really feel that. It's a little bit, feel that emotionally, and that it's just
Mm,
beautiful that to notice, to hear that you're getting what you need, and that you've learned your awareness is, I'm observing how your awareness grew around this trauma, and that allowed you to find the practices, ask for what you need, learn to do some real inner work to relate to the feminine in a different way, to relate to yourself. So
mm.
really, it's really a powerful example of this, Luke. Thank you for sharing
Thanks
that.
for mirroring that. Yeah, thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you.
As you were sharing too about unremembered traumas of the birth experience for you, actually, where I went, the first place I went was to working in early childhood education and realizing,
Mm,
talk about how conditioning could be a trauma, the receiving of conditioning, which is, who's doing that? It's the education system, it's our parents. Not blaming anybody in particular here. You don't know what you don't know. And I think about how, wow, I witnessed, look, first I want to say children are very resilient, and they're the ones, the coping
very.
strategies we talk about, they are so creative to come up with coping strategies to handle all kinds of intense situations that children create, that they then leave as an inheritance to our older selves. Um, but I witness a lot of things in the education business, or education field, I should say, um, of the way children are disciplined or taught to talk to one another, like around,
Yeah.
teachers aren't often equipped with NVC or restorative justice or some of the these modalities that usually are not. Most of
Right.
our preschool teachers were not. Maybe I'd say none had tools like that, or parents even had the ability to facilitate, to not discipline without using shame or without using
Right.
violence. Those are like our traditional,
Right.
or to not not just with discipline, but with how we resolve conflict in our life. Like a lot of, I know a common thing in my life or other people's, we avoid conflict, or we're not taught to meet the other in our emotions or in our vulnerability too. So I was thinking about that and realizing that to me is a major source of this unremembered trauma that
Mm,
we're experiencing, that's nuanced. It's not like, it doesn't necessarily mean you were beaten or you had any kind of these terrible situations you named in your life, but just by going through childhood in the world, you have received
yeah.
shame, conditioning, and violence in some ways, or of repression. And so I
That's
certainly
right.
have. Yeah. So I'm curious to your thoughts on that.
Yeah. So you're absolutely right. When you're talking about the education system, there's not nearly enough, especially trauma informed educators that are really learning. I think first and foremost, the education system has been built around sort of really a cookie cutter approach, filtering kids through a system with specific expectations that everyone's, I hate to say it, sort of, you know, children are sort of being herded like cattle through the public education systems. And of course, we could go on a complete tangent with that one. But yeah, to your point, is it's really important, especially during these developmental years, these critical years of these children's lives, that they have some source of real attunement in order to, especially in the context of being able to self actualize, right? Being able to step into what I call purpose. They need a support system that can really help guide them in their truth so that they can ultimately be fully expressed. And rather than being conditioned, indoctrinated, told what they are, what their possibilities are in life, right? And we could be talking about the next Albert Einsteins. We could be talking about, you know, the person who wants to cure cancer, or who has the capacity to. And we're essentially filtering them through a system where we're giving them specific options. You either can become this or you can become that. And I think, logically speaking, maybe there's some merit to it. But when we start to talk about the nuances of trauma and really the intricate nature of the soul of each of us human beings, who I believe is unique in our own capacity, um, you know, that requires a whole different approach. Let's just say I don't think the public school system has the bandwidth to be able to accommodate that, which is challenging because in today's society we're really kind of expecting these teachers, these educators, you even in this case to almost be this sort of parent like figure for these children because they're spending so many hours together, and us as human beings we're getting less and less time and therefore less and less energy and bandwidth to be a parent, to be able to show up in those really, really important ways.
I think you've really accurately diagnosed the challenge that parents and teachers both face now in today's systems. I do think that was spot on. And I also think this
Thank you.
intricate nature of the soul that you named too, this way humans have been limited. I feel like we found a common ground here with Four Gardens and Purpose State of how do we cultivate the expression of the intricate nature of the soul? To cultivate that is my question. Coming to purpose, back to the deeper purpose of that soul, is I feel like one way of posing around your work too. Very connected work we're doing.
Yeah.
And I think that we're inheriting some of this is one reason I'm so fascinated on trauma now too, and conditioning, is that when we're thinking about guiding people and supporting people, we're dealing with the inherited conditioning and traumas that if we're not aware of the systems that are causing that and how those systems actually impact different people of different backgrounds and privilege in different ways, then we can't really support people or really offer methodologies and systems and guidance to help people really thrive and really get into purpose and be their full self. And so I just really thought that was well said.
Oh, you're so right. Yeah, it's so important that we have context to really be able to relate and empathize in order to guide these souls really to their unique, authentic expression. And that takes a lot. Even as a practitioner, and you probably realize this, I'm learning every single day, more and more about various cultures and backgrounds and ethnicities and you name it, that tend to have more generational traumas and patterns that are passed on. So yes, I absolutely agree.
Talk a little more about, if you're open to sharing, how your journey to purpose. So how you came to Purpose State and what really brought you, some of the key moments in your journey that brought you to this awareness that Purpose State is your purpose.
Yeah. I've, it really starts in my childhood. I'm definitely practicing what I'm preaching, and I experienced, I think, a lot of pain. I know a lot of pain in my childhood because, of course, I do not blame my parents at all, my father specifically, but he had a very specific sort of idea of what he wanted me to be in life, and it was a lot different than what my soul was calling me to do, to be, to express myself as. And this has created a lot of sort of discord, a lot of conflict within my household, and with my family of origin growing up, and perhaps was a source of much of my anger and rage that I experienced early on from about 3 years old forward. And so it really starts there, Jake. And, realizing that deep within my being, I have this tremendous amount of empathy. And, again, I think that perhaps the thing that we need most is what we give best. Based on that principle, what I've really needed most in my life and what I've strived to achieve and pretty much everything that I do is essentially freedom, is a freedom of expression, is learning how to become unapologetically confident in, first and foremost, who I am, but really learning and going through this process of figuring out who I am beyond the conditioning, beyond the adaptations to trauma. And that itself, I think, is what I work with my clients on. That's what I've had to figure out for myself, obviously through working with some really incredible mentors, but having to put together my own system because there really wasn't anything out there that was specifically made for me. believe it or not. And so purpose state is really a culmination of all these different sort of modalities and, my experience, which, as you and I have worked on, it also includes a pretty elaborate background in the area of business and entrepreneurship. And I've always had this desire to really to strive for excellence in my life. I've been very achievement oriented. So while I'd say that's definitely based in trauma in some capacity, it's created quite a bit of a sort of a work ethic and a desire to do something of significance in my life, to leave a lasting impact. And so purpose state was really sort of born from that place, and being able to consolidate all of my many, many interests. For those of you that follow human design, I am a manifest generator. So I have many, many things that I'm interested in. And, learning that that wasn't necessarily wrong, but the background that I came from made that sort of wrong. So again, finding my truth, finding who I was deep within, and how that needed to be expressed. And I'll say this much, it looked a lot different than the expectations that were placed on me as a child. And of course, unconsciously, I was trying to live up to that. Consciously, in my mind, as a young man, as an adult, I rebelled, and it created essentially this dissonance, and led to a number of costly mistakes, emotionally costly. But now I get to help my clients through purpose state navigate this sort of inevitable process of sort of shedding the not self, so that the core essence of this unique human being can come forth in an environment that supports that person to be self-actualized and fully expressed. So hopefully that answers your question. I know there's a lot to it.
That's a great answer. And I've a couple parts stuck out to me that I want to revisit, which are about you describe yourself as a person with deep empathy, which I would agree with. I've always felt your empathy, and that being a strong suit of yours. And
Thank you.
and also your business background too. You started a number of companies, and you've done a lot of work in business and entrepreneurship. And I'm just like, I feel this curiosity coming up around how to balance deep empathy, which can be very tactically advantageous to have empathy, and it can be very crippling to have empathy too, right? It can be limiting. And actually, a lot of people who don't have a lot of empathy are rewarded in the business world because they're willing to fire a lot of people or cut a lot of costs or do extractive things to the environment. And that's what I would describe as non-empathetic to other beings, to do those kind of actions. So just
Absolutely.
wondering how that has been in your business journey, how you found, I see the end point here as where you are now, holding a lot of empathy and business unified together here in your business, but that journey too of and how you see that as weaving.
That's such a great question. Um, so yeah, it's been a journey, Jake. I'll tell you that much. Back to the trauma. I underneath this sort of very emotionally, I would almost say numb child, was a very, very, very sensitive, empathic young man and soul. And so most of my life, I've been engaging in various coping mechanisms and adaptations that have moved me further and further away from, in a sense, having empathy, of having to feel that pain, um, of navigating this world, and really trying to survive and make something of myself, not only in the environment that I grew up in, but just being a human on this planet during this time. And so I've been on the extreme end where literally I felt like I had no empathy. I was following more of, the Steve Jobs of the world, who were praised for, and, put on a pedestal for making these really executive, sort of emotionless decisions. And in reality, we're learning, wow, that's actually a pretty terrible quality. that maybe carries some value in the world of entrepreneurship from maybe a board of directors standpoint or a shareholder or stakeholder standpoint. But as far as like being a good human being, a decent human being, who, especially in this day and age, where if you really want to be a true leader, you absolutely need empathy. You need empathy. I think it is perhaps the meta skill of our generation, because we don't need more unempathetic Steve Jobs like CEOs who are quote unquote running the world, because where has that gotten us? Look around us.
Not been good.
It has not been good. So we're looking, I think, for very heart-centered leaders to step forth. It has been a process for me to reconnect with that deep well of empathy that I possess. I find myself crying on the regular, just expressing some of these repressed emotions that have been there since I was a toddler and before. And it's really, I think, helped me soften in such a beautiful way that I'm able to meet my clients and my colleagues in ways that really contribute to their self-actualization, to their greatest performance, if we want to call that, both in their personal lives and their professional lives. So I think it is of immense importance.
And I imagine
your question.
Meet yourself too with those qualities.
And meeting myself. Yes. Thank you. Yeah.
That's been I know that's part of your journey too, is finding that compassion for yourself, and that you talk about softening too. And I've experienced this
absolutely.
As well, softening those voices of self-judgment and of self-criticism, of self-judgment too, is when you do
self-hatred.
Self-hatred. Yeah.
It's a big one.
Yeah, it's part of it too. And I'm also inspired to help support those leaders rise up too, that are going to lead with that vision.
Absolutely. And we need to support one another.
Yes.
It feels like in some respects we are working against sort of the status quo in the business world.
We are.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, there's a toxic masculine culture. We could definitely say that. You talked about the numbness. It wasn't your word, but the lack of empathy, which I would say the numbing of the leader, of the man, of this impression of the leader as cold and as calculating and not unfeeling. And at least there's been some cultural blowback against that, cultural backlash against leadership that way, but it's still far too weak. I think we need more. We need that. I want to strengthen that call to get into, to be asking for men that are feeling, and women too. I mean, I think the masculine affects male bodied and female bodied people, and the patriarchal systems are in all of us. So I think that
absolutely
there's a lot of work to challenge these, and I think it brings us back to where we started this conversation too, around healing and purpose. You see every company now has its mission statement and its value statement. It has to. There's an expectation that a company is going to have values. I know there's a lot of greenwashing and a lot of chicanery going on, and performative value signaling type stuff. But at the same time, there's something real about that is growing, of the idea of transitioning these organizations to out of that, or like transitioning them into something new that needs to happen right now.
Absolutely. It's definitely a start. It's a start. And obviously, as we've kind of dug into, there's a lot of depth to it, and it can be very, very nuanced, especially when we start talking about the way that we're treating the people that are working for such organizations.
Right. Yeah, I think that's it. I know that you work with people involved in organizations and large organizations, and interacted with these kinds of, these are the everybody's interacting with large governments, large companies in their day-to-day lives. I know you are too. And I think about just people who are coming to this podcast and want to start deepening into their purpose, asking these questions. Maybe they're not yet ready to work with you too, but they're at the point of just wanting to come out of this interview and listening to this, and start to do that self-exploration, that self-awareness journey that you've been on. So where are you?
Yeah,
What are some of the key tools to start learning about trauma and to start getting towards purpose?
definitely. So I'm going to first and foremost plug my free masterclass
Please do.
that is on purposestate.com/masterclass if you want to go straight there. And that's a great resource because I've actually been able to really track back and be able to create a concise explanation of how I believe that trauma itself and this conditioning is directly correlated and inextricably linked to our purpose in life. Um, on that note, I really think that so much of this, like our purpose, goes hand in hand with really self-discovery. And I think kind of the paradox that I was referring to earlier is that it's not as the first and foremost, the steps towards self-discovery are releasing the parts of not self, shedding the parts of not self by way of excavating those pieces that have been conditioned and projected onto us, that are taking us in the wrong direction. They're taking us further away from our authentic expression. So I think that that's a really foundational piece of really finding your purpose, of living your purpose. And a lot of the stuff that you're doing, Jake, with Four Gardens, of digging into these various parts of our lives, of the journal prompts and the community-based mirrors, and the inquiries that you're presenting with getting people to really be self-reflective. And that goes a long way. That goes a really long way. So just continuing to inquire within, obviously, meditation, acts of stillness, removing ourselves from the noise. A lot of that noise is just continuing to reinforce these beliefs or these sort of ego constructs that aren't even ours. They're not ours at all. They're a result of trauma. They're a result of conditioning. They're a result of the society, the environment at large that we've grown up in, that we've been a part of. So much of it is just cultivating awareness. And I think that's Four Gardens does such a great job with that. And also in my masterclass, and the journal that I'm also offering for free on my website. There's a lot of great questions in there that are going to start pointing you in the right direction.
I would highly recommend that too, to do that work with Luke. Check out his website, linked in the description below. And yeah, I'm thinking too of having all these tools now and all this knowledge you've acquired. I mean, I've learned a lot from you. I know you've made it
Thank you,
a
brother.
focus of your life to do this work and healing and purpose work. And I think, we were talking about our younger selves earlier. I feel like curiosity coming up of what would you say to yourself at a different point in your life now that you have the tools that you have now and the experience. And you could pick any point. Maybe you could say 5 years ago, maybe 2016. Because I saw that in your story that was a sort of pivotal transition time. What would the
Yeah.
messages be that you would give to that younger Luke? So, Luke, feeling with all the tools that you have and learning you've done, inner work over the past years, what would you say to a younger version of yourself? For instance, the version of you, younger Luke in 2016 or 2017, when I know you were going through so much challenge and
Yeah.
ready to make a change.
Yeah. I think first and foremost, I would just really love to meet him with a lot more softness and compassion. Um, Taking these pressures, speaking of conditioning, off of him that were projected through his childhood, through the various influences that he had as a young man, as a child, this sort of expectation to perform, to achieve, those things, they led to burnout. And in 2016, my nervous system was shot. I felt I was definitely in my quote unquote rock bottom. Um, and that child, that version, that younger part of me, that was really suffering in those moments, just it needed a lot of softness. And, from there, I think I would have been able to pick myself back up with more grace and less sort of harshness, back to talking about the inner critic, talking about, the self-hatred for me that was coming up during that time. And yeah, just giving myself permission to just be, to really accept, to know that right where I was at that moment was exactly where I was supposed to be. Because according to society, according to my family of origin, it wasn't okay. It wasn't okay for me to be in the depths of my despair. It wasn't okay for me to not be producing, for me to not be expanding and excelling and creating wealth and creating just period. And, I've would help that younger version of me really know that this is a generational pattern, generational curse, if we want to call it that, that has been there long before me. And it hasn't worked out well for those that have come before me. And so I would really love to bring it a higher state of awareness around these things that I've been cultivating ever since through the personal work.
It's just a fascinating thing to imagine. So I love the way you approached your younger self there, and thinking of this idea of
Mm,
getting a coach as a coach and guide, getting to guide and mentor younger Luke. I think about that for myself too. How would I do that? And I guess since we don't ever get to literally do that so much, there's a mirror of that, I think, in getting to talk to younger people or receive guidance from elders too, where I find myself
oof.
in my 30s, now we're both in our 30s, speaking to someone in their 20s and saying, it's okay that you don't know that answer right now. It's okay. Like,
Yes.
it's okay to be yourself and to just take that chance right now. That tends to be my advice. Just go for it now.
Mm,
Go easy on yourself. Don't try to know everything right now. And I find older people telling me a lot of the same thing now.
yeah.
My mentors of bringing more softness was the word you used
Yep.
to that self-talk,
Exactly.
self-awareness. So I think it's just a really interesting thought experiment there.
It really is. And that type of support is what I would call sort of a secure attachment. It really is perhaps one of the most healing qualities that we can utilize in our healing journey, in our evolution of our soul, of this path back to wholeness that I spoke of earlier on. And of course, that comes with a level of safety, a level of feeling seen and understood and supported unconditionally in such a way that really catalyzes this authentic expression of us to come forth. And that's a really, really potent. It's so simple. And to me, I find myself being almost really sad about it because somehow, some way, it's been really lost on us as human beings. According to attachment theory, I mean, at least 50%, probably a lot more have what's called an insecure attachment style. And, there's a lot of suffering involved with those. And, they don't teach this stuff in school. Well, some schools, but let's just say the average person doesn't really understand the blueprint of our relational qualities. And so to be able to have someone to mirror that back to you, to be able to just kind of give you a little bit more ease, some permission just to be right exactly where you are. Wow. So simple. So simple. Yet, unfortunately, not as abundant as it should be, not as common as it should be. So it is truly a gift.
Since I've learned about attachment theory and I've been learning more from you, has been fascinating me. And it's a riddle too, especially in how it relates to attraction. I found it to be really fascinating to notice how avoidance and anxious attachment styles attract in me, how these behaviors we recreate these behaviors of our childhood, these attachment styles. And, I'm just playing with this. I'm seeing this as this kind of map that uh, instead of pathologizing people or myself with it, the way I've been using it lately, just to be like, okay, everyone's on this map. Everyone's it's like this dial on an airplane that's bouncing back and forth
Yeah.
between full and empty. And You want to get it in the middle. And the thing that I've really been harvesting around this lately, around attachment theory, and you've been reflecting this today, is that asking for what you want, knowing your attachment style, noticing when I'm feeling anxious and I am in a connection,
Yeah.
over the type of connection that I can ask for what I need in that connection. Hey, I'm feeling anxious. I need some reassurance here on this. I'm feeling like, hey, also I've noticed I can ask, hey, I've been feeling an avoidant pattern in this type of relationship, whether it's business or intimate. I need this kind of support to
That's right.
be less avoidant, because this is my defense mechanism to not deal with something very uncomfortable or scary for me. And I'm needing you and as a partner to meet me in that
Mm,
in that moment. And I can only get what I need by asking.
that's right. And for many of us, asking itself can be a very, very, very painful pursuit, historically speaking. So, just commending you for even being able to speak up. And when we can really attune to one another's needs, and of course, within reason, right? Let's not pour from an empty cup. Let's not deplete ourselves. But to meet the small ask that we have of one another, it is so tremendously healing. So, what a gift. And I'm so happy that you've been diving further into attachment theory. And I wish that for everyone, because I think it puts together, to answer your question, the tools that lead you to understanding your purpose. I think attachment theory is a really big one.
Yeah. I mean, so with attachment theory too, I think the thing I've learned too is not to just apply it to others so easily, but to really like first go
Right.
inwards and see where I'm at on this thing. That's been my biggest lesson on it too. And when it comes to purpose and attachment theory, how expand a little bit on the connection between how that theory and purpose work together.
Sure. Yeah. To your point, Jake, it does exist on a continuum. So just going about trying to profile someone, saying, maybe they have an avoidant developmental
I've
attachment
just been hearing that.
style, or what's that?
I've just been hearing that in some circles, people wanting to
Yeah.
do that. And I think let's go deeper than that into three-dimensional
Yeah.
human beings.
That's right. We're very complex creatures. So definitely, that's good to note there. And in regards to attachment theory and its relationship to purpose, well, to me, attachment theory is really a set of adaptations, often to these misattunements, right, from our childhood caretaker, specifically our attachment figure, which typically is trauma itself, these misattunements. And so, because our needs were not met in whatever capacity as a child, we developed these adaptations in order to cope with them, right? In order to cope with the emotional pain that arose perhaps from this ongoing conflict or this ongoing circumstance. And so, when we're talking about learning how to get back to a place of wholeness, to get back to a place of secure attachment, which I think is a very important part of living our purpose, is having a secure attachment in all of our relationships. This provides us a blueprint, right? Just like maybe if you were to remodel a house, on how to create those upgrades, on how to go about doing the deep inner work so that we can construct a new version, a new evolved version of self. So it gives us almost some cheat codes in a sense. It gives a little bit of a head start around, because this can be a really puzzling pursuit to figure out, hey, what's wrong with me? Why am I doing this? And why did this happen this way? And I think when we start to understand attachment theory, and specifically the attachment styles, it starts to give us somewhat of a framework to use to start navigating that process from, let's just say, painful behaviors, behaviors that might be more indicative of trauma responses, right, to purpose responses, purpose behaviors, the things that nourish our soul and fill us up.
Yeah. And I think that when I'm out of balance with my relationships and my attachment style, yeah, I just find myself, yeah, it feels like not me. You used that before. I feel like I don't get that. So I really relate to that.
Absolutely.
answer. Yeah.
Yeah. We do the things that tend to cause us ongoing pain.
Yeah.
While they are brilliant adaptations to what felt like maybe unmanageable emotional pain as a child, really is actually causing us more pain as adults.
And you use the word pattern on your website and on some of your communicate around getting stuck in patterns. Stuck in patterns are important. This is, I think, a key one, right? That we're landed on here is like, these are patterning behaviors. I find that we bring awareness, we change patterns to them and other tools to change our patterns. But I, it feels like this is a great example of just stuckness to where stuckness could come from. Why are all my relationships following this same pattern? Attachment theory was one of
Right.
those. Oh yeah, there's a light going off. Okay, yeah, that's how I've been doing this avoidant thing.
Yep.
At this point, I've been doing this anxious thing, and that comes from my trauma. That comes from this point, and here's not to simplify it all down, but here's what I need. Just figuring
Yeah.
it out. Here's the and there's a lot. I mean, I made it sound very simple there, but there's quite a lot of inner work into each of those steps. Uh,
Yes.
and feeling that happens when I've gone through this journey.
It's not easy work, so I'm commending everyone that's doing it. Yeah, it's definitely not easy. Sure is worth it though.
It sure is worth it. And that's
Sure
why
is worth it.
it's so important to me to get your message out and to really encourage people to work with you and connect to you and take the class, read the book. I'm all about it. So thank you for doing this important work.
Thank you, brother. Yeah, just commending you for doing your work and leading by example, being a true leader, a heart-centered man, and man, just giving this gift to the world with 4 Gardens and all of the workshops and everything that you, Ari, and continue to gift us. So thank you.
Thanks for that blessing, Luke. And yes, thanks to Ari, who I'm sure is listening to this because he listens to all the episodes and is grateful for his collaboration and your collaboration and support, both of you on this journey. Been my 2 top collaborators. And I'm so thankful. And just, coming away from this conversation, harvesting a big smile and an open heart. So thank you again for this.
Amen, brother. Likewise. Thanks for having me on today.
My pleasure.
Sending blessings to everyone listening. Thanks for tuning in. And I hope to be able to serve you in some greater capacity moving forward. And just sending you, just a lot of good energy for your transformational process.
Appreciate that, Luke. Thanks again for coming on.
Likewise, bro. Catch you soon.
Thank you so much for listening. That was my conversation with Luke Monteleone. Definitely do check out all of his links in the description. Grateful for you listening, and definitely look out for the clips we're putting out on Instagram and on YouTube of Luke sharing some of these great stories and wisdom that he has for us. Have a great day and keep on growing.